WSI's model of the Tadano HK70 truck-mounted crane comes in a nice branded box, and there's some information about the real crane printed on the side. This particular model is in the colours of Baetsen, which is a Dutch haulage and craneage company. Inside the box are 2 trays, and it's all factory sealed. Lifting the lid, the various parts are well packaged inside, but there's no instructions for the model. To start with, we'll just assemble the crane in a road-going configuration. There's only a couple of parts to add. The counterweight sits in the middle of the truck, and that helps even out the load on the tyres when the truck's out on the road. The only other part to fit is what Tadano call the extension boom, and that rests on brackets on the side of the boom, and it's also pinned into position, so it's a good firm connection. The hook's already reeved in the factory, so the crane's ready for the road. This version of the model sees the crane mounted on a DAF CF chassis, and it's certainly very detailed with all of the transmission and suspension modelled. The wheels are nicely detailed, with the rear axle having larger wheels than the others. The DAF CF cab looks impressive, and it's helped by all of the graphics and artwork. At the rear there's a ladder and towing hitch, and the lights have plastic lenses. The outriggers are intricately modelled with twin smooth-faced pistons. The crane cab has a very detailed, high-quality interior. There's more good detailing on the rest of the crane body with plenty of hydraulic hoses. The main boom ram has a plastic jacket with a good colour match. The top of the boom has a hoist cut-off chain, but the pulley block itself is a solid piece. The extension boom is a decent metal lattice, and the hook block is a nice metal part. Here the crane is on its back because it likes to have its belly tickled. And the first thing to note is that all the wheels spin freely. This chassis has 2 driven axles and they're on a nice floating arrangement, and it's good the way the transmission articulates. The rear axle steers and it's linked by a complex arrangement to the front 2 axles, but the whole mechanism is very stiff with a limited range of movement. Hey presto, and the truck is back on its wheels, and it certainly rolls well enough in a straight line. Well, we know the range of steering movement is very limited, but let's give it a try. With massive thumb power we're able to ease the wheels over a little, and then you can see that the truck will actually travel in a very shallow curve. Here we are on site, ready to set the crane up, so the front outriggers pull forward. The pads have got a special pinning arrangement so they can be stowed under the truck when it's driving along, and to lower them you carefully unscrew them, and it's nice that a smooth-sided piston is revealed. If you want, you can set the front outriggers a little wider. And a nice touch is that plastic spreader plates are also supplied with the model, and so you can put one under each of the pads. The rear outrigger beams can also be set to a range of extensions. The outrigger system has been modelled well because with all of the pads down, the truck can be supported in the air wheels free. Moving on to set the crane up, we unhitch the hook from the loop at the front, and then the giant hand hydraulics can be used to raise the boom. The main boom ram on the review model had some areas where it was quite stiff, but in other places it was a bit loose. With the boom up, the crane can now rotate round to pick up its counterweight. The counterweight slabs are nicely modelled by WSI because they are all separate plates. Once the crane is in place, the big hydraulic hands can raise the counterweight up and it clips on underneath the crane. With its counterweight attached, the crane is effectively now ready for work. Let's take a moment now to have a look at a couple of the truck chassis features. The DAF cab tilts and there's a nice engine block to be seen underneath. And there's another very small feature at the back of the chassis. There's a towing hitch and the tiny pin is removable. There's also a couple of very nice features on the crane body. There are 2 opening flaps and inside there are some fully detailed engine components. The only thing that detracts a little perhaps is the size of the hinges, but that really is only a minor gripe. Another item included with the model is a load block. It's a metal block with Tadano foam on it, and it helps keep a nice tension on the hoist rope. To operate the hoist, a special key is provided, and it fits over the end of the winch drum axle. There's enough friction in the winch drum mechanism that it will hold a small load without any problem. Moving on to the main boom, and the telescoping mechanism is fairly standard for a model like this. Each section smoothly extends and then a locking pin comes into place at the full extension. All that's needed to retract the boom is to reverse the procedure, push in the spring clip, and the boom telescopes down. We mentioned earlier that the stiffness of the main boom rams is a little bit hit and miss, but the ram can be pinned at maximum extension. Talking about maximum extension, now let's go large and add on the extension boom. The first thing to do is to disconnect the hoist rope tie-off point, and you can pull out a little pin and then it drops off. And then you need to disconnect the safety chain and pull the thread through. The extension boom gets offered up to the connection points on the boom head, and a couple of steel pins are used to lock the connection. There are two possibilities for the extension boom. It can either be folded or you can unfold it like this, and that will give the maximum underhook height. The fold out section is then locked with a steel pin. Moving down the extension boom, there's a small guide pulley that can be lifted up, and once that's in place you can then put the hoist rope through it. This part of the modelling process becomes an eyesight and hand steadiness test, and on this occasion the Cranes etc. assembly engineer performs adequately. Only one hook block is supplied with the model, so if you want to run it on a single fall of rope, then you have to be a little bit inventive as to how you tie it off to make sure it hangs properly. Safety is always the priority, so the hoist cut-off chain should be added back. On the boom head it's held with a plastic pin, but that doesn't fit properly on the extension boom. And in fact it looks better anyway just to hook the end of the chain into the eyelet at the end of the extension boom. There's one last feature to look at on the extension boom, and that is that the offset angle can be set. It's controlled by a ram and it's stiff enough to hold any pose you want to set. So how big is the model? Well, at full extension the top of the main boom is about 3 feet or 90 centimetres high, and to the top of the extension boom it's about 47 inches or 120 centimetres. This is another highly detailed crane model from WSI. The DAF CF cab and chassis looks really good, and for the most part the functionality works well. It's also a very smart looking model in the colours of Baetsen, and it's highly recommended.